Hey y'all. Last week we talked about mercy. And whereas mercy is more passive, it's what God doesn't give us that we do deserve. Today I want to talk about grace, which is active. It's what God gives us that we don't deserve. In order to understand that, we need to understand that we don't deserve anything from God. The Bible's very clear that we are all sinners and that we fall short of God's glory, and that in truth we only deserve his wrath and condemnation because of who we are and what we've done. But God's grace intervenes, and God's grace changes everything. God's grace takes our sinful lives and transforms them into something usable for Him. John said in the beginning of his great work, his great gospel, he said that the Word, talking about Jesus, became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory full of grace and truth. You see, God took the truth of the fact that we are sinners and that our sin separates us from Him, but His grace overcame that truth. And so Jesus came full of grace and truth. In fact, Paul put it this way. He said that the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people. That grace came in Christ Jesus. And so when we think about the reality of what we deserve, which is separation and condemnation, and what we actually receive when we place our faith in Christ, God's grace becomes real and powerful and extremely valuable in the lives of Christians. And so when we are saved by His grace, then we are called to live that grace before the world around us. We're called to be conduits of that grace to others around us. That's why God's plan was to use His people to take His message of grace to the lost world. See, a lot of times we get it backwards. We think that, well, we have to earn God's grace. Well, if we had to earn it, then it wouldn't be grace. Grace is something that God gives us that we don't deserve. In fact, Paul said in Ephesians, he said that for by grace you have been saved through faith. And that is not of your own doing. It is the gift of God, not of works, so that no one can boast. We're not going to stand before God one day and say, God, it was you and me, we did it. We're going to stand before God one day and say, God, it was all you. You did it all. And I'm so thankful that you did. That's what grace is. God provides for us what we cannot provide for ourselves. But in doing so, we're called to love one another, to be kind and tender-hearted towards one another, Paul said in Ephesians, and forgive one another, even as Christ forgave us. Oftentimes, we look at grace as something that we're supposed to hoard, that we get our grace. I've got mine, I'm taken care of. I got my ticket punched. I'm okay. But that's not a good understanding of grace. We're called to take the grace that God has given us, and we're called to share it with the world around us, because that grace is the very foundation of our relationship with God. And we don't have to walk around in fear of God, worrying that he's gonna somehow zap us. We have a growing intimate, personal relationship with God that we can share with the world around us. In fact, the writer of Hebrews said, "Let us with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." And so that the grace that God gives us in salvation, he continues to give us as we continually walk with him and grow closer to him. And that grace that he gives us is given for a purpose so that we might give it away. And the more that we give it away, the more that he gives. We ought to be a gracious people. Oftentimes, Christians, we truly are not. Oftentimes we're judgmental, and we're condescending and arrogant and all of those things that holier than thou Christian stereotypes portray. A lot of times we've earned those portrayals, but we don't have to. We just need to remember that God gave us his grace and that we can be gracious with the world around us. Remember, Jesus came full of grace and truth. He didn't deny the truth, but his grace overcame the truth. Can we live that kind of life and be those kind of gracious Christians with the world around us? Grace is not passive. Grace is purposeful and active. Who are you going to be gracious with today? Find someone and let the light of Christ shine through you. God bless you.